Hello to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani here. The stories coming up within the hour. The talks are over, but we may or may never know what was discussed between the US and Russian officials in the 12 hours they spent talking in Saudi Arabia. No heads will be rolling after journalists added to a top military chat in the US exposes some of the conversation. Plus, Burundi's President Evariste Ndayishimiye claims he's seen intelligence that Rwanda plans to attack his country. Let's begin the world today. Talks between the US and Russian officials on Ukraine has ended in Saudi Arabia, but we may or never know what was discussed. Earlier today, officials on both sides continued discussions, which has now ended, and a source told media correspondents on the ground the details will be announced later. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says results of the meeting that happened on Monday have been conveyed to their respective capitals and are currently being analyzed. During a daily conference call with Russian and international journalists, he said, "We're talking about technical talks where they go into details, so of course the contents of those talks definitely won't be made public." On the potential for another call between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, he says there are no plans right now, but that could be quickly arranged if needed. It had been expected that Moscow and Washington would release a joint statement on yesterday's meeting at 8 p.m. GMT, but it was never shared. Meanwhile, Ukraine's state emergency services posted pictures on social media today showing the aftermath of Russian drone strikes in the cities of Fastiv and Borispil in the Kyiv region, in the city of Izium, the northeast Kharkiv region. In another development, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has a scheduled meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow, Wednesday, at the Élysée Palace in Paris. Both leaders will hold talks ahead of the next iteration of meetings as part of the coalition of the willing due to take place on Thursday. Talks are continuing between European leaders on how to ensure any ceasefire agreement secured between Russia and Ukraine is maintained, as well as how Kyiv can be given assurances about its future security. Just a while ago, the president of the European Council, Antonio Costa, said Europe must acquire all means to defend itself against military aggression. In a speech at the European Policy Center, he told attendees, if Russia considers that Ukraine's borders are just a line on a map, why should it respect any other country's borders? Costa adds that peace without defense is an illusion and that Europe needs to continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine to create lasting peace in Europe, saying Russia's aggression gave a new sense of urgency to our strategic autonomy, not only on energy, but also on defense, adding there needs to be a collective effort to boost our defense spending by more than 30%, paving the way for decisions which are shaping a Europe of defense. We're returning now to topics discussed at the meeting between the US and Russian officials in Riyadh, which filtered to the press as a potential revival of the 2022 Black Sea grain deal, which had allowed cargo ships traveling to and from Ukraine to safely navigate without being attacked by Russia. Both Ukraine and Russia are major grain exporters, and prices rocketed after Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February of 2022. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in constant contact with Russia on the issue of easing Russian grain and fertilizer exports. He says Mr. Guterres is trying to help and is looking for ways around current Western sanctions. The UN, alongside Turkey, brokered Black Sea Grain Initiative in 2022. But in the summer of 2023, Russia pulled out of the agreement and stopped giving safe passage to cargo ships going to and from Ukraine. Speaking in a separate interview, Mr. Lavrov said Russia wants the grain and fertilizer markets to be predictable so that no one country tries to drive Russia away from this market, not only because they want to earn a legitimate profit in fair competition, but also because they're concerned about the situation with food security in African countries and other countries in the global South and East, which suffer from the West's unclean competitive games. Well, we have Lavrov also speaking some more about the grain deal. Also in the same interview, he says Russia needs clearest guarantees and that the U.S. must order Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to comply. He said President Vladimir Putin supports the resumption of the Black Sea Initiative in some form that is more acceptable to everyone. President Putin also supports President Trump's initiative to declare a 30-day ceasefire, but they cannot take Ukraine's word for it. I want to bring in now Chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization in Russia. Dr. Ibe is in Moscow. A pleasure speaking with you again, Dr. Ibe. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you once again for having me, and thank you viewers for tuning in.
So we're back again talking about these now secretive talks between the U.S. and Russia. Why do you think there's so much secrecy over what was discussed? The only thing that's filtered out to the press is the grain deal that Russia pulled out of, I think, sometime last year.
There are many reasons. The first reason is that a lot of people, especially third parties, I don't mean the main parties, the third parties like to use news as media talking points or political score points or political points, rather than, or sometimes getting too excited before the real tangible result is achieved. I would like all of us, and especially the viewers, to recall that Russia and Ukraine almost reached a deal before the ex-Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, with the nudge by the US, came in and torpedoed the deal. And that was how the whole agreement that would have stopped the conflict a year or two ago wasn't able to be stopped. So it is important that everything is ironed out and attempts are made to prevent third parties from torpedoing any potential agreement. And then, of course, the second reason is that it hasn't really finished. There are still some points that haven't been ironed out, to be frank. And the priorities for Russia are different from the priorities of the West. We all know that the conflict is not between Russia and Ukraine. It should be rightly titled Russia versus the West.
Well, I wouldn't argue with you on that because it does seem like, Russia is fighting the rest of Europe in this war. But the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov sort of indicated why everything is hush-hush when he was talking about the grain deal that Russia pulled out of last year. He says the U.S. needs to order Ukraine to comply. I found that a pretty interesting choice of words. Doesn't that indicate, however, some connivance with the U.S. Against Ukraine in some way?
No, it's not connivance. It's just stating the truth the way it is, just a plain truth. The truth is that if you don't want Ukraine to do it, Ukraine won't do it. We are not fighting Ukraine. We are fighting your ability to supply weapons to Ukraine under the guise of grain and other things that may be against our interest. So if the US stops it, then Ukraine will have no reason to do it. Everyone already understands that without the US support or without NATO support, the conflict wouldn't have lasted this long. So it's just a statement of fact that please stop supplying weapons, drones, ammunition under the guise of grain deals against our interests. And if you stop it, Ukraine will not have any reason to do that. It's simple.
But there are lots of undercover, deals going on with this war. Let's not forget that Russia also has had deals with China and with North Korea. The Russian government has refused to confirm or deny it has welcomed North Korean soldiers who are helping to fight this war. They also refused to confirm or deny support from China either. So, when you talk about, doing, the grain deal being some guise for transferring weapons to Ukraine and helping out with this war, Russia also does have some blame in that area, doesn't it?
What you have said is it's no doubt that allies or friends of Russia, Russia doesn't really call them allies. It's a Western terminology. Russia calls everyone it has partners with as equal partners, and the thing is that we live in a world where sanctions and financial sanctions are an effective tool in terms of curtailing or managing the action of major geopolitical powers. And that is why even if someone may have the opinion to help Russia, he may not do it outrightly because he may be afraid of sanctions or secondary sanctions. And it makes people to not really do what they want to do and to pretend and to do all of that. That is why even if, irrespective of their opinion, they might not come out to say it. But you see, in a conflict, what is very important apart from the main soldiers on the ground fighting is logistics. And every side is trying to target the logistic, the supply chain of the other side. Otherwise, you wouldn't see Ukraine attacking deep into Russian territory, factories, even civilian sites as well. And also the Russian side targeting potential drone factory production sites. The aim is what both sides are trying to target the logistics, but we know that the grain deal is also another example of a potential military target when it is used to supply arms. And if in that case, those ships are destroyed when they contain arms, then it's the right thing to do. And obviously, you could see many of these by the secondary detonations that often occur when they are attacked. You could see that it's not just the missile or the projectile that explodes. You see, like after a minute or two, you see secondary explosions, confirming that there were ammunitions on board. So I think, a spade should be called a spade. And the US should say, okay, we are not going to supply arms to Ukraine, and we're not going to use the Black Sea. We're not going to use the grains deal to do that. And we will try to be transparent about it and provide a means for which Russia can check. And I think that will seal the grain deal and it will, allay some of the fears and concerns of both sides.
Yeah, and possibly help Russia to get back, on this deal because it is important that Russia does for the security of those ships passing through the Black Sea, so that they're able to get to Africa and to
Black
most
Sea,
of the
yes.
other countries that also need them. These are all the intricacies of war, I suppose. But I know that there are many conversations and negotiations that should go on or will go on. Thankfully, both sides are talking, if we could describe the U.S. as a neutral partner in this war. But Sergei Lavrov also says that the Russian president supports the 30-day ceasefire that was agreed with the U.S. president the last time they spoke. So why did he not honor it?
No, they didn't agree to a 30-day ceasefire, and uh, the the terms of the ceasefire was not agreed upon. Russia has made it clear that the 30-day ceasefire should not be used to arm Ukraine, and that was not agreed on. So it's not any kind of ceasefire that is in Russia's interest. It's a ceasefire that will prevent the possibility of an attack on another day in the nearest future, not even distant future, and that is what I think Russia is trying to prevent. And the Ukraine for Ukraine, it's easy to understand why they would agree to that because they are losing the momentum in the war. They've lost the Suja region. More of their territories are being lost, and their support from the West is dicey at best. And so there will be it's in their interest to want an undefined ceasefire to enable them recoup and dig some more trenches. But obviously, Russia understands that it has the momentum. Russia understands that what this ceasefire could be used for, and doesn't want it to be used as a what you call this Trojan horse to rearm Ukraine. So I think that's the concern, and it's just a way to say that we want a 30-day ceasefire, even more ceasefire, more than 30 days, but not any kind of ceasefire.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Western media did report after the conversation between US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, there was an agreement to the ceasefire. The next day, Russian drones flew into Ukraine and attacked energy infrastructure in Ukraine. You're saying that that never happened, that the Kremlin never agreed to a ceasefire in that call.
The Kremlin agreed to a ceasefire on energy infrastructure. Only energy infrastructure. It was indicated very clearly, specifically. Ceasefire on energy infrastructure. And Ukraine attacked first. When they were leaving the Suja region, they attacked a major gas storage facility which supplies gas to Europe while they were retreating from the Suja direction. And of course, Russia in that case has the right to react or to, after all, the West, especially in the form of, do I say Israel? Yes, Israel believes in tit for tat. I think that's a famous slogan in the West. So if a side breaks the ceasefire, the other side may decide, okay, we respond symmetrically, a measured response, and hope that you will stop doing that so that we can both respect the ceasefire.
Interesting perspective. Now, apparently, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to meet with French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. They'll be talking, of course, peace and weapons and everything in between. Do you think that Europe will eventually help bring an end to this war? I mean, Zelensky is looking to other allies. He does seem to have veered away from the US because the US seems to have better relationship with Russia. Um, we also understand why this is difficult for European countries. I mean, in the early part of the war, there were many sanctions imposed on Russia, and it almost seemed like Europe was trying very hard to stifle the Russian economy, to bring Russia to some submission in this war, and to eventually leave Ukraine. Do you think he would have any success with getting more weapons from European partners than the US?
They can try. It's not Russia isn't worried about that, to be quite frank. Russia is trying. Russia understands that the boss of NATO is the United States, and Russia understands that when the United States gives a policy direction, uh, Europe and EU will comply, and so are the other NATO members. So that's pretty much clear and standard as the modus operandi. So Russia is trying to negotiate with the person who called the shots, and I think that is not a difficult pill for anyone who likes the truth. But at the same time, um, as the Polish president rightly said, there is no way EU can succeed in helping Ukraine without the US support. This is the Polish president saying it. He's also maybe one of the most anti-Russian presidents, but he is at least able to come to terms with the truth, and the policy is actually reflecting that. If the United States shows in words and actions that he doesn't want to rearm Ukraine and he really wants peace, then I think a peace can be achieved. And you also understand that many of these people, many of the parties who are crying foul, they're not crying foul. Initially it was out of ideology, democracy, human lives, children, mothers, and all of that. And then it all came down towards the end of the war to interest, just like I've been saying from the beginning, interest, 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 strategic national interest. Now everyone wants a slice of Ukraine, whether territory or mineral resources, because they have heavily invested from their gross domestic product that they should, and taxpayers' money, which they should have used on their own citizens. They exported it to Ukraine and they are waiting and praying and hoping that they will get a return on investment. So that's why you don't hear too much more of those democracy and ideologies, but now you hear about trying to strike a deal, mineral resources, interest. And who would have been hearing about this 2 years ago? But it was such is life, and that has been the way geopolitics works. Leverage, they might mask it under some virtue signaling terms, as they like to do. But when you find the lowest common factor or lowest common factor of everything they are saying, you find out that it all boils down to interest. And if they've invested a lot of resources already, they will less likely want to give it up easily.
Right. I think both sides wouldn't want to give up anything, at least not yet. More negotiations ahead. Dr. Godwin Ibe, thank you for speaking with us on The World Today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alexander Lukashenko has been inaugurated as president of Belarus for a seventh time during the official ceremony in Minsk. The incumbent president was seen placing his right hand on the constitution, reading the oath of office before signing an official document. In the video, the head of the Central Election Commission, Igor Karpenko, presented the newly inaugurated president with his certificate. In his inauguration address, Lukashenko hit out at Western claims that his country was a dictatorship and said it was rooted in the genuine interest and collective efforts of his people. He stressed the people of Belarus had endured much, claiming the criticism of the political course of the country was a price of the state's independence as well as people's prosperity. 5 candidates stood in the Belarusian presidential election on January 26, while Lukashenko took 86.82% of the vote. According to the Central Election Commission, Lukashenko won that percentage. World leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, extended their congratulations to the new head of state. We're off on a short break now on The World Today. Still ahead. He's $1.4 million richer, but is that enough to compensate for the 40 years 89-year-old Iwao Hakamata spent on death row before being acquitted? Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump has backed National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, who accidentally added a journalist to a group chat about airstrikes on Yemen. This coming after the White House confirmed on Monday that The Atlantic magazine's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, was added to a group chat in which top U.S. officials discussed plans for strikes against Yemen. Goldberg was given hours of advance notice of the strikes, which the U.S. launched on March 15. It was not immediately clear if the specifics of the military operation were classified, but they often are, and are at least kept secure to protect service members and operational security. Trump, meanwhile, told journalists, "I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time." Also saying that the attack was very effective in any case. The U.S. president later said the incident was not a scandal, but a glitch. He says Michael Waltz has learned a lesson and that he's a good man. The journalists witnessed people appearing to be government officials using the group to organize an airstrike on the Yemen Houthi group, which killed 53 people. Members also criticized Europe for freeloading. Well, Washington, D.C. is still digesting a serious security breach at the heart of the Trump administration. On the military action, Goldberg did report that the account named J.D. Vance wrote, "I think we are making a mistake," the vice president said, targeting Houthi forces that are attacking vessels in the Suez Canal, which serves European interests more than the U.S. because Europe has made trade running through the canal. Vance added that his boss was perhaps unaware of how U.S. action could help Europe. And we're going to go into some details of some of the things were said in the group chat. Vance said, "I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe. Right now, there is a further risk that we see moderate to severe spike in oil prices." The vice president went on to say, according to Goldberg, he would support the consensus, but would prefer to delay it by a month. Arguments over why the U.S. could and should carry out the military strike against the Houthis did not sway the vice president, J.D. Vance. He said, the defense secretary said, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again." Hegseth reciprocated, "I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic." A group member, who only identified as SM, suggested that after the strike, the U.S. should make clear to Egypt and Europe that what we expect in returns. If Europe doesn't remunerate, then what, he asked. Excuse me. If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. Now, to Vance's concerns that the action may be seen as going against Trump's message on Europe, the Defense Secretary wrote, VP, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS, that's Trump, important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out, the economy, Ukraine peace, and all the rest of them. I think messaging is going to be tough on no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funded. The Trump administration has consistently blamed Joe Biden for being too lenient with Iran. Well, it all sounds a bit confusing. So we have national security and international affairs analyst Joanna LeBlanc joining us now. She's in Washington. Joanna, I'm sure you have poured through most of this conversation, the back and forth, and it is quite revealing, isn't it? But what are we really looking at here? Is this a security breach for the Trump administration, or is it, as the president says, it's just a glitch and not a scandal?
Well, Amarachi, this isn't just a slip up. This is a potential legal and operational crisis. Let's just be real. But the first step, however, to make such determination is to determine whether or not the information that was discussed was actually classified information, right? And the CIA director, Gabby, announced that it was not classified information. However, that decision could be challenged either through the courts or through the Congress to make a final determination as to whether or not it was classified. Now, if this was indeed classified information, there's actually law that protects this kind of information, and it is the Espionage Act. And it would have been a breach of that act, which specifically states that it is illegal for anyone with authorized access to classified information to willfully communicate to unauthorized persons, even if it was unintentional, right? So Signal here is not an approved platform to have secured conversation about issues that have national security implication. And even within the chat group, you had a journalist that was accidentally added, right? However, under the Espionage Act, there's an intent element that must be met, right? So there has to be an intent to harm the United States and also to aid foreign powers, and that would have and that intent would have fall under Pete Hegseth and the other folks who were involved in the conversation. So without the intent, it's a bit difficult to actually get a conviction on a matter such as this.
Joanna, I'm wondering if you can also answer this question. The editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine, Goldberg himself, was he close to any of these officials? And the reason I ask that is someone did add him to that group in Signal, someone who had him in his contact list, his phone records on his phone. So someone did add him, someone who knew him, someone who was close to him, whether by mistake or intentionally, he was known to someone. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, Amarachi, I think many of us may have made this same sort of mistake where you met to add certain people to a group chat and accidentally left them out or accidentally added someone who was not supposed to be a part of the conversation. So it's very possible that he was added by accident, because obviously being a journalist, you have access to all of these public officials, right? They have your phone number, you have their phone number. So it is very possible that Mr. Hegseth may have worked with him in the past for a story and had his number stored in his phone and accidentally added the journalist by accident. So this is very, like Mr. Trump said, this is very human. It could have happened to anybody, right? But unfortunately, there is law that protects classified information. But as I said earlier, without that intent element, it may be a bit difficult, if this case were to go to court, to actually convict someone under the Espionage Act.
Right, and he does reveal a lot. I mean, troves of the conversations that took place between the vice president, and we can tell that by the tone that it is a vice president who's making, who texted, some of these chats, and then Pete Hegseth. Some people are distinguishable, in this chat, and I understand there is a Senate quiz going on. Quizzing the director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, FBI Director Kash Patel, National Security Agency Director Timothy Ho, and Defense Intelligence Agency Director Jeffrey Cross. Some people are saying that they're not aware that they were even added to this group on Signal, which is quite confusing, isn't it? Because if they're all part of America's intelligence community, so it is not out of place, and they would be added to a group like this. But should they be expressing this ignorance, about the existence of the group or about their presence in such a group in the first place?
Well, Amarachi, I think, again, from a human level, that sometimes we're added to groups we don't even know, right? Let's think about WhatsApp, for example. I know there have been numerous times when I've been added in a group that I knew nothing about until months later to find out that I was part of a group. So it's very possible that it did happen. However, given that their position, such high level positions, within the intelligence community, making sure that our homeland is safe and secure, I think that there should have been a little bit more precaution, right? And you should know the different groups that you are a part of. I think that that is a security breach, and to admit that in front of the world, that is quite concerning, because we saw how former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton was greatly scrutinized, right, over her email server, right? And the rule of law here demands consistency, right? High-ranking officials can't get a pass for exposing war plans, even accidentally, rather. So you have Democratic leaders like Chuck Schumer, who are calling this a stunning breach in our country's history. But again, I think that it's possible that they could have been added to the group, but it is nonetheless unacceptable given the role that they play within the government to safeguard our homeland and to safeguard our national security secrets.
Well, thankfully, the chat was not exposed before the attacks on Yemen, because then we'd have something really serious to talk about, Joanna. But about the way the administration has gone about trying to sweep this under the carpet. President Trump says, oh, it's just a glitch, and then, the reason there is a congressional hearing on this, the Senate quiz in this, is because of the reaction, I suppose, by the American people who are like, okay, so what's really going on here? Are we really safe if ordinary people are being added to groups like this? Then imagine if it was a compromised individual who was added to that group, then America's security would really be under threat.
Yeah, I think this kind of, whether it was a slip up or whether it was intentional, certainly erodes trust in the government, right? Because if the Secretary of Defense cannot safeguard America's classified information, how can Americans and our allies feel secure, right? But I think the first step in all of this is to really determine whether or not this information was classified. And the classification of whether or not a certain information is classified is done through the executive branch, of course, the Office of the President, with President himself, the intelligence community, and so on. And those positions could actually be challenged through the courts, and Congress can organize hearings about this issue to determine. Because if it was indeed a classified information, then you can go ahead and bring charges under the Espionage Act. But it is rather concerning that we're even having this discussion, as it relates to these people at the highest level within the government. So it is rather concerning.
Yeah, and I understand how uncomfortable it is for you to answer some of these questions, Joanna, but we appreciate you're doing, your best with this, because this involves American security. For any country, it is concerning. The UK does say that if this had happened in the UK, then the leakers would face disciplinary process. But the Trump administration, as we have already established, has been trying to play this down. What sort of precedent does it set, though, for Trump going further down the road with America's security and with other planned operations by the U.S. intelligence and military services in other parts of the world?
Look, Amarachi, I think, again, as I said earlier, I think this is an isolated incident, right? And the first thing is to determine whether or not this was classified information, because if it was not classified information, this analysis is not even applicable, right? Because there's nothing else to do if it was not classified information. But what I will say is that I would imagine friends and allies all across the world are concerned because they share information with the United States. They share certain types of intelligence with the United States, and they expect those information to be in a secured location. And they expect the information to not be revealed to the greater public, and only those who have the proper clearance should access the information. So I think it creates a great deal of uncertainty, especially in the midst of a global trade war, when we're dealing with tariffs and the possibility of taking over Greenland and a host of other issues. So I think this is just another distraction. And I think Mr. Trump, as a president, I think he is downplaying it so that it could go away. And so that he can focus on other matters. I have not seen other instances where this administration have breached the trust of the public in this particular manner as it relates to national security. I have not seen other cases where the Espionage Act was potentially violated, right? So I think that this is the first instance, and let's just hope that all parties who are involved learn their lesson, and Mr. Trump actually does hold folks accountable. If this was indeed classified information, I do hope, for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the American people, that Mr. Trump do hold people accountable to make sure that this never happens again in our homeland.
Well, Joanna, thank you again for joining us on the program. Appreciate your analysis on this, and as you said, hopefully an isolated incident.
Thank you.
Well, amid continuing uncertainty about the impact of deep U.S. funding cuts to humanitarian work worldwide, the head of the UN agency coordinating the fight against HIV/AIDS, Winnie Banyanima, has warned that an additional 6.3 million people will die in the next 4 years unless the support by the U.S. government is reinstated. Speaking in Geneva, Banyima noted that the funding freeze announced by the White House on January 20 was due to end next month after a 90-day review, focusing on Africa, where the east and south of the continent share 53% of the global HIV burden. Banyima warned that closing down all of a sudden drop in centers for girls and young women will be disastrous because more than 60% of new infections on the continent are amongst girls and young women. Several other UN agencies that are heavily reliant on US funding have also warned the cut in support, in addition to chronic underinvestment in humanitarian work globally, is already having a serious impact on the communities they serve.
Take one tablet. People do not know where to get their next tranche of art medication. They go to this facility today, tomorrow they are told to go to another, probably that's like kilometers away. So I think it's really...
A Japanese man who spent more than 40 years on death row until he was acquitted last year has been awarded $1.4 million in compensation. According to a court earlier today, that's roughly $85 for each day he was wrongfully convicted. Former professional boxer Iwao Hakamata, who's now 89 years old, was sentenced to death in 1968 for quadruple murder, despite repeatedly alleging that the police had fabricated evidence against him. Once the world's longest-serving death row inmate, who was acquitted after a DNA test showed that the blood-stained clothing which was used to convict him was planted long after the murders, according to Japanese public broadcaster NHK. The Shizuoka District Court confirmed to CNN that Hakamata had been awarded more than 217 million yen, a payout that represents about $85 per day since he was found guilty. His legal representative, Hideo Ogawa, described the compensation as the highest amount ever handed out for a wrongful conviction in Japan, but said it could never make up for what Hakamata had suffered. Still ahead on The World Today. We can now watch pigs fly, well, more like going down a water slide into a pond at a zoo in China. Stay with us. Welcome back. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 65 people in Gaza in the past 24 hours, including women, children, and 2 journalists, according to the Palestinian Health Authority, nearly a week after Israel broke its ceasefire with Hamas. Palestinians in Gaza have again been fleeing for their lives after Israel launched its new offensive in the territory, which started on Tuesday last week with a wave of airstrikes that killed about 700 people, mostly civilians, ending 2 months of relative calm. According to the health ministry run by Hamas, Hossam Jabat, a journalist for the Al Jazeera Mubashir channel, was killed in northern Gaza on Monday. Witnesses told the network his car was targeted in the eastern part of Beit Lahia. Earlier in the day, Mohammed Mansour, a reporter who worked for Palestine Today, was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Han Yunis in southern Gaza. Wildfires fueled by strong gusts of wind ravaged southern Chile, devastating nearly 8,000 hectares of land, according to the National Disaster Prevention and Response Service, which declared a red alert on Monday for the municipalities of Los Soces and Lumaco. This video was recorded on Monday. It shows the Triguan region, the damage to residential buildings in the area, people assessing what was left after the disaster. One of the locals recalled the panic that she felt when the fire was approaching the household. She says she saw the flames approaching the hill and told her daughter, "This is it." She fled with a child, shouting, "Mom, come down." She refused to stay and started filling water containers. A neighbor ran over with a ladder and they began lifting water containers. Firefighters were tackling the blaze from the other side while locals controlled the area that she was at. The wildfires forced the evacuation from at least 27 homes. The Red Cross provided psychosocial support and first aid for those affected. President of Chile, Gabriel Boric, stated that he's instructed the government employees to be deployed to the areas to help affected people and their families. A man who fell into a large sinkhole in South Korea's capital, Seoul, has been found dead, according to the local fire department. He was riding his motorbike in the Gangdong district when the road caved in at about 9:30 GMT on Monday. Rescuers found his body underground early this morning from where he'd fallen in. A car driver was also injured in the incident, which has gone viral on social media in South Korea. And China has released 5 staff members of the U.S. due diligence firm Mintz Group 2 years after they were detained as part of a crackdown on consulting firms working with foreign businesses. Their detention in March 2023 came at a time of heightened suspicion of foreign espionage in China and kicked off a wave of raids on consultancy firms such as Bain & Company and Capvision Partners. Mintz Group said in a statement it's grateful to the Chinese authorities that their former colleagues can now be home with their families. Their release comes at the conclusion of a business forum in Beijing, attended by dozens of top foreign executives, including Apple's Tim Cook and Pfizer's Alberto Bourla. China has been trying to revive foreign investments in its sluggish economy. Government data released in February showed that foreign direct investments plunged 99% in the last 3 years. Back here in Lagos, wife of the governor, Dr. Ibijoke Sanwo-Olu, says more deliberate actions must be taken to end the spread of tuberculosis in Lagos State and in Nigeria. She was speaking at the 2025 World TB Day event held at Alausa, where she commended efforts of all partners, saying more work needs to be done in collaboration with the state government to end TB in Lagos.
Every year, 24th of March is observed as World TB Day to amplify the urgency of ending tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is one of the deadliest infectious diseases and has continued to devastate people, with 10.8 million affected globally. In Lagos, the state recorded 17,280 TB cases in 2022, a health challenge that requires continuous sensitization, which is why the State Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the Office of the First Lady's TB Steering Committee and other partners, is creating awareness about the disease. They moved from Alausa Secretariat to the State Assembly Road to share flyers and enlighten the people about the symptoms of the disease, which is in commemoration of the 2025 World TB Day. After the walk, the senior health officers and other guests converge on Fulari Coca Conference Hall to engage the health practitioners on how to manage tuberculosis.
We need to improve on the screening as well. It's a simple questionnaire. Have you been coughing? The most significant question there is if you've been coughing for over 2 weeks. Anyone can ask that question. It can be part of any one of our clinics. And anybody who answers yes to that can then be put through the system.
This disease needs to be eradicated. We're doing a lot, but we need to do more.
In 2024, about 19,000 residents in Lagos were diagnosed with TB, keeping the state government on its toes on how best to curb the spread and also provide treatment for patients.
But Nigeria is the first in Africa and sixth in the world, with countries with triple strategy, which is TB, MDR-TB, and TB-HIV. Currently, last year alone, Lagos State accounts for 9% of national TB burden. Contact tracing is an important strategy in all infectious diseases, including TB.
Prevention is better than cure. If we can create enough awareness, we'll be able to prevent it so that it doesn't even happen in the first place. And then, if there is, we're able to access care with them.
The World Health Organization and other partners are willing to work with the state government to curb the spread of TB.
The childhood TB remains a big issue in the state. So far, we have been working so hard in identifying TB cases, and the state has done a lot. But we still need to work harder in expanding TB services and also ensuring that more children are identified.
It would be nice if more nurses or adult staffs are being trained and deployed to facilities so that they can help in bridging that gap, so that people that commence treatment don't stop.
Wife of the Lagos State Governor, Dr. Ibijoke Sanwo-Olu, who is also a TB champion, appeals to partners to strengthen their advocacy in eradicating tuberculosis.
Our course to end TB will be more aggressive, and our goal in 2030, even before 2030, will be achieved. We can end TB, commit, invest, deliver.
The Lagos State government says screening and treatment of TB is free across all general hospitals and primary healthcare centers in the state. And everyone is encouraged to get tested, thereby keeping Lagos free from tuberculosis.
The Grand Mosque in Mecca is at the third expansion phase of the site, designed to hold up to 2 million people. Now, huge crowds have arrived from across the world during this holy month of Ramadan. The project is one of the largest in the mosque's history, with courtyards widened and improvements to entry and exit points to reduce congestion. It all began in 2011 and has been ongoing, although it marks the first time in over 2 decades that construction cranes are not present on site. Meanwhile, tourists and locals are flocking to the Jianxi Animal Park in Dongguan to watch a spectacular pig diving show. Black and white spotted pigs leapt, oh there they are, into a pool from a specially designed platform in form of a pig's head, to the delight of the public. They're doing this all on their own. Who were watching and filming other animals, including monkeys, pandas, and sea lions, take part in the show. Dongguan Jianxi Park features acrobatic performances by other animals, including elephants and seals. According to the zoo's website, it has over 2,000 animals of 100 different species. That does look really interesting. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Obadi.